Take two.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today in this new recording of The Hopenning, this brand new episode. We are so glad that you are here with us today. The Hopenning is a place where hope is happening, and it's a space that was created by my wonderful co-host, Fran, and myself, Marina. And we are just here to try and bring hope to everybody who needs it. And Fran is a teacher. She is a full-time teacher. She's been a 34-year veteran teacher in elementary school age children in Northern Alberta, Canada. She also does rapid transformational therapy part-time. I'm Marina. I am in Calgary, Alberta, and I am a rapid transformational therapy practitioner and hypnotherapist, as well as a singer. And I tease and say, when I don't sing, I work, and when I don't work, I sing. And today we are very privileged to introduce you to a very special guest. And Fran, you have the honors.
It is an honor. And we are welcoming Julie Valenti here today from San Diego. So Julie is she's a book author. She also developed a program which I find absolutely fascinating. And having been a 20-plus year member of a 12-step program, I find that Julie's program just brings everything together. It makes it so understandable. So she's got a 20 concept approach that she's developed over the course of many years, and through online programming and in-person programming, she's able to bring her program to people with addictions. And it's just an amazing thing. So welcome, Julie. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Your book is incredible. Like, I've looked at it, I've read it through, I've highlighted, there's, turned over pages because it speaks to me so much. Julie, tell us what was your road? The road that you traveled in order to become such an expert on addictions and the 20 concepts.
Okay, so I say that I began this work when I was in the womb, right? Because I was born to a mother who had an amphetamine addiction due to prescription. And that was back in the mid-50s. I'm going to tell on myself my age, but back in the mid-50s, it was common for women who have just given childbirth to get prescribed these, what they called little mommy's helpers. And they were actually amphetamines. And it was helping a woman feel good and get beyond if she suffered from postpartum depression, sleep deprivation. It just gave her that burst of energy, which of course we all know amphetamines will do. And so my mother suffered from that and was addicted to that for many, many years. And being raised by a mother who was inconsistent, unreliable, unpredictable, because when she was taking her pills, she was fine. And when because it was a controlled substance, there would end up being lapses in time before she could get the prescription renewed. And it was those times where her parenting skills really went off rail. And you can just imagine she was detoxing, not by choice. She was having blackouts. She was having muscle spasms. And then, you have a little 2 or 3-year-old pulling on you, mommy, mommy, mommy. And it's like, it was her at her worst. So, which then sort of gave me this experience of what was it like to try and attach to somebody like that. And of course, we know as little children, they have to attach for survival. So what that ended up doing is setting off all kinds of internal alarms in my little organism, because I couldn't do that which I needed to do in order to survive. So, of course, I had no idea all of this was going on for me. It was only in retrospect, it was only through my own addictions, my own disastrous relationships, that I finally hit the wall, hit my knees, and said, what is happening here? why am I just destined to be miserable and hooked on drugs and having failed relationships over and over again? Well, even though I was curious about that, I didn't understand it. It still took me many years before I finally figured out what was actually going on. And in the meantime, I went to nursing school. And so my first career was that in the medical profession, studying anatomy and physiology. But the undercurrent was me doing what I knew how to do best. And that was take care of sick people. So I had this hard wiring. My whole value, my whole worth came from taking care of sick people, right? And I got that in my childhood because I took care of my mother. I figured out how to escape from her anger and her criticisms and her sharp tongue. I used to say my mother can slice you to shreds with her words. So my way to escape that was by becoming hers. Of course, I had to abandon me in that process, but I became hers, and I took care of her and rubbed her feet when she was having muscle spasms. And so my hard wiring is I can stay safe and I'm a value and I'll be okay as long as I'm taking care of sick people. So I went into the nursing field. Well, I also hooked up with, married, and dated every addict and alcoholic I could that'd have me, because this is who I was. Of course, it wasn't really who I was. It was who I became based on that desperate need to survive and attach and to matter. So after, I finally had, my umpteenth disastrous relationship, I realized that I was doing something I was the driver of the vehicle that was taking me over the edge again and again and again. So I went back to school and studied psychology. And I specialized in the category of addictions because I tried to, I had to understand my mother, couldn't understand all these men that were addicts in my life and my own behavior. So specialized in addiction, and then I figured out what was going on. I married the anatomy and physiology studies and the addiction family of origin pieces, and I said, oh my God, my brain is causing me to do this. So that's a very, very long answer to a simple question of sort of how did this all begin for me? And that's how it began.
Like it begins with so many of us, right?
Sure.
So many of us that are in the caring fields, the healing fields, even teaching. There's a reason that we get attracted to these careers, attracted to these people in our lives, to reenact so that eventually we can learn it and recover. So I'm super grateful for the course that you have on. So today, Julie, you're going to take us through the 20 concepts. We have time for 10 of them tonight, but in my opinion, and Marina, probably you as well, these 10 are they're the foundation of why the addiction. And you have an interesting way of, you said it before, the attachment conflict, the attachment, you don't really call it trauma so much, you call it an attachment disorder, an attachment confusion.
Right.
Will that come up within the concepts when you explain them?
Yes, absolutely. And I just want to mention that the name of my program is called Wisdom and Recovery. And I picked that name because wisdom to me is a deep, deep and profound knowledge and understanding. And it's sort of something that becomes a part of you. And the recovery is not the same kind of recovery that we think of when we think of the 12 steps, recovering from the wreckage of my past, not that kind of recovery. Remember, I said in my early childhood, I had to leave myself. I had to become somebody in order to survive. And recovery in wisdom and recovery is the recovery of the authentic self. And that loss of that authentic self is so painful that it typically leads to addictions, where we go to hide that desperate, painful sense of self that I'm just not, there's got to be more. I'm just not living the life that I was meant to live. And so the recovery is finding out, who was that before I adapted to my environment in order to survive. So the name of the program is Wisdom and Recovery, and it is, I do individual, I have people that work with me, but we do individual sessions and couples. It begins with relationships and it ends with relationships. So we do couples work, we do family work, we do classes and webinars and workshops, and it's a real full program. So, and it's all virtual now due to COVID. I did have a brick and mortar up in Portland, Oregon and in San Diego, but once COVID hit, it all went virtual, which, you know, there's that blessing and the curse, right? Which is, now I work with people all over the world. So it's really accessible. And you can just go to the website, wisdomandrecovery.com, and you can immediately see everything that we do there. And the name of the book is called Knowing How. And I'd been noticing that everybody that came to see me had been in years and years of psychotherapy. And my thought was like, why are you coming to see me if you've been doing years and years of psychotherapy? And that's when I realized that I wasn't convinced that the psychotherapeutic model was helping people with PTSD from childhood attachment conflicts. And so I put together, again, how I said earlier, the sort of the mashing of anatomy and physiology and addiction, and bringing that together and realizing this is a brain thing, this is a memory thing. These are neural pathways deep in memory based on survival that are driving you to do a certain thing, connect to certain kinds of people, pick particular types of job, because your survival is, you know, it's a memory organism and it's all about survival. So I developed an approach called the 20 concepts, and it's based on brain science and neuroplasticity. So I realized that this methodology and this approach could be helpful for PTSD. The first, so there's 20 concepts, you know, there's a lot of them, but when they break them down, the first 5 concepts are, this is what I learned. This is my wiring. This is the wiring, the neural pathways as they develop in the child's developing brain. The first 5 concepts are going to address that. And the next 5 concepts are, this is how I took that wiring, fragile wiring, and I hardwired it. How? Through reenacting, doing it over and over and over. And you'll see that when you rewire the brain, how do you do it? The name of the book is Knowing How. How do you do it? Time and repetition. That's how you got wired, and that's how you're gonna rewire, is the time from age birth to age 25. Brain's not fully developed until you're age 25, right? So that's a lot of time and a lot of repetition. And how are you going to use those next 10 concepts to rewire? It's going to require time and repetition. But at the end of it, it isn't going to take 25 years. I promise you that. It'll take, if in a year of doing this, understanding it, learning it, speaking it, writing it, hearing it, after a year, if you have not changed substantially, then either you're not doing your job or I'm not doing my job. I guarantee you I'm going to be doing my job. So you got to be dedicated. You want to want it, and then you can do it. Everybody can do it. That's the beauty of neuroplasticity. Everybody can do this. but you have to know how. So I'm going to hold up my little book here for a second. And this is the book. And you notice that the book has this puzzle, because this information, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, okay, in my opinion, this information is the missing piece. It's the missing piece of the puzzle. So, all right, how about I just launch right into the first 5 concepts?
Fantastic. I always talk about those the things that you've learned as that radio station that keeps on looping in your head until you take it personally and you hardwire it, and that's who you become. So I would love to hear those first 10 concepts.
Okay, so here's the first, and I say this very first concept is the foundation. If you do not learn and understand this first concept, you won't be able to apply all the other ones. It's a foundation that every other concept is built on. And it's simply this: you've got to understand how your brain and body work. That's it. So understanding brain and body, meaning you got to understand that there's 2 different parts of the brain. There's the conscious brain, the thinking brain, the intelligent brain. And then there's the subconscious brain, the survival brain. In the conscious brain, we've got, like I said, thinking, language, communication, formulas, numbers, imagination, and creativity. So that's in our cerebral cortex. And the lower part, our survival part of the brain, has our autonomic system. In other words, that which regulates our heartbeat and our respirations and our immune system and our reproductive system, all those systems. It is running all of that. Now we understand why it's called the survival part of the brain, because without any of that, well, you know. So it also has memory. This is a memory organism, but memory is there for survival. I'm going to remember, I'm going to hold in memory that which poses as a threat and that which causes survival. So it's got our autonomic system, and it's got our memory, and it also has our emotion. Meaning emotion, I can get into this. This could be a whole webinar in and of itself, and it actually is. But our emotion is the energy that moves in our body. It is our neurological hormonal system that gets activated for survival, fight or flight. So that's all in that lower survival, and it just makes sense. Of course it is. So if you don't understand how all of that works and how it gets activated, and how when you have a big emotional surge, your cerebral cortex and your thinking brain shuts off, well, that's a survival mechanism, right? There's no time to be thinking and considering when your life is at threat. It's time for action. It's time for those hormones to go rushing through the system to prepare the body to take action. And the problem is we don't live in that world anymore. So we have to evolve our brain to fit the world that we live in, which is when I'm having big emotional surges, I need to be integrating intelligence into that to guide me so that I can communicate. How many times have you had a big emotional situation and only later thought, oh, why didn't I say that? Or, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Or I could hardly even speak, right? Yeah, because that went offline. So part of this work, rewiring the brain, is creating a rapid firing neural pathway between the intelligent part of the brain and the survival part of the brain so that they're working together. It doesn't exist, right? You have to actually create that. And, you know, thank goodness for the miracle of our brain and body, we actually can do that. Thank God for neuroplasticity, where we can literally create neural pathways, use them again and again and again, and hardwire them so that it just becomes the way we are. So trying to get the whole world to do this work, it would be a great world indeed, but evolving our brain one brain at a time. So understanding brain and body, here's what I say. Think about it as a vehicle that's in your driveway, your brain and body. If you don't know how it works, if you don't know how to run it or how to maintain it, what are the chances that that vehicle is going to take you where you want to go? No, it's going to be slamming into the sides of buildings and taking you over cliffs. And some of us have experienced that kind of jarring reality in our lives because we don't know how to run this. But it's time to learn. And so that's the very first concept. Concept number 2, attachment, which simply means that in order to survive, you have to attach. You can't, so if you take a little newborn baby and put it out on a doorstep and close the door, that baby's not going to live. It needs to be touched. It needs to be fed. It needs to be sheltered. It needs to attach in order to survive. Now, here's where we can get in some trouble in this particular population. And that is, if you have a parent that is, such as mine, drug addicted, I can't get a secure attachment. It attaches and then it detaches. It attaches and it detaches. Okay, so I can't get a secure attachment. Now, if you have a parent who's depressed, if you have a parent who is abusive and mean, or if you have a parent that is neglectful, busy. I mean, even if you have a parent that's working 2 jobs and going to school at night so she can put food in your mouth, still going to have an attachment disorder, an attachment disruption, right? So we're not going to demonize parents. Matter of fact, that's a distraction. You got to keep your head in the game, right? So we're not going to glorify or demonize parents. We're just going to say what is what is. What was is what was. But it's ours to understand. And the other piece of that attachment is that what we hold in memory about our attachment figures, we have survived. So guess what we're going to do? We're going to go out into the world and we're going to pick very, very similar people based on memory because we know we can survive that and anything else poses as a threat. So there's so much more to attachment, but I probably don't have time to get into it. I'm trying to keep my eye on the time. So I'm going to go on to the next concept, and that is understanding the victim, perpetrator, rescuer triangle. The truth is when you are a child, you are a victim, simply meaning you can't set a boundary. You can't say, hey, stop doing that. I don't like that. Right? You can't leave like, okay, if you continue to do that, I'm out of here. No, you can't do any of that. First of all, you can't speak. You can't formulate sentences. You can't pack your bags and leave. You are there. Therefore, you are a victim. So later on in life, we discourage sort of doing these sort of triangulated positioning of self because hopefully later on in life, you can set a boundary and you can walk away from something that is abusive or neglectful or harmful. But as a child, you couldn't. We look at the parent as the perpetrator, simply as the person that is creating the harmful situation. And then little children are always looking for rescuers, grandma or a teacher or something. Now, when we're adults and we're looking at this body of work and we're going like, we stay out of the triangle. We don't allow ourselves to say somebody is doing something to us. No, somebody's not doing something to us. Someone is doing what they do, and we're in close proximity. If you don't like it, step out of there. Set a boundary, do something about it. Nobody's doing anything to you. So it's a real growth program. It's about, matter of fact, the last concept I'm going to cheat. Spoiler alert, the last concept is adult responsibility is non-negotiable. So we stop reacting, acting like we did before, and we become responsible. The ability to respond in an intelligent, kind, sophisticated, honest way is the goal. So we stay out of the triangle. We stay out of that kind. And as adults, we think somebody's doing that, so they're the perpetrator, we're the victim, and then our rescuers, as adults could be drugs, alcohol, shopping, affairs, anything and everything that gives us a break and gives us, so it's really dangerous to sort of get into these triangulated situations or tell ourselves a story that this is what's going on.
And even, wouldn't you agree, Julie, that even say, you know, back in the day when we were in the relationship with an addict, if they pulled something, right? If they didn't come home, or if they came home drunk and threw furniture around or whatever, we would get into that mode where, well, I'm going to show you how this feels, and
Yeah, I'm gonna flip it up.
right?
Yeah,
You
now I'm
become
gonna be you a
that.
victim, and I'm gonna be the perpetrator. I'm gonna go out and have an affair, or I'm gonna take a bunch of money out of the bank account, or I'm going to one thing or something, but it's a bad, and when I work with couples, that's the first thing that we begin to identify is you've got to stay out of the triangle, meaning that you're not a victim and that person is not your perpetrator. That person is doing what they do, and you are doing what you do. And if you don't like what's happening, then you do something different. So, yeah. So we try to stay out of, I say that there's an antidote to the triangle, and that is what I call the 5-part communication formula, which is basically a way of addressing problems, situations, issues in a relationship. And use this formula. I'm going to talk about it a little bit when I get to that concept, but it's a way of refusing to do a triangulated conversation or a triangulated interaction, where you're just going to talk about what you see happening, what you think about it, what your body is telling you, i.e. your feelings, and then you're just going to say what you want. And then you're just going to ask the person you're dealing with, what do you think? Are you willing to do what I want? Are you willing to consider what I want? You know, I remember thinking in relationships, I wished I just knew. Why didn't you just tell me what you wanted? Right? Instead of all the games and the accusations and that triangulated conversation where both people are trying to convince the other one that they're bad and wrong. You know, what are the chances that's going to, how's that going to fix or resolve anything? Except make people want to get away from you. So they want to get away from each other. So then they look at the rescuer and it's just like, oh, well, hell, let's find a way to get out of here. And the rescuer, again, with the drinking and the shopping and the doing, right? That'll get you out of there. But
and then blaming the other person for
right.
your own behavior, right?
Right. So that's number 3. Number 4 is called the locus of control. This is really important to understand. When you are a child, all children, not just children from these particular types of backgrounds, but all children have a developmental stage called the locus of control. And it simply means that the location of control is in them and that they make everything happen. So if I blow out the candles on my cake, then I'm going to make something happen. If I put my tooth under the pillow, I'm going to make something happen. This is very magical thinking, and it isn't really thinking at all. It's a belief. So the child believes that they are the center of the universe, that they make everything happen and everybody is there for them. And so if they yell or they make a lot of noise, then they make their parents come to them. And it sort of works. It gets really reinforced by the environment. And it is a stage that you're meant to develop out of. So here's the problem. If you're a child in a home where there's attachment conflicts, you're not getting that good, careful, attentive parenting. So they're not helping you transition out of that child, that locus of control. So here's what the child believes. The child believes they're making everything happen. So not just the good things, not just the tooth fairy, not just the, Santa Claus, but they're also making everything happen, including daddy leaving, including mommy hitting me, including, right, all the things that are happening to the child believes they're making it happen. And then comes the next piece, which is, if I'm making this happen, then I can make it not happen. And then I start using all these little childlike strategies to make it not happen. But guess what? It's not happening because of you anyways. So it keeps happening. So now the child develops a belief that there isn't anything wrong with them. There's something wrong with me because I made these bad things happen and I can't make them not happen. And this is what begins to be what I call the there's something bad and wrong about me syndrome. And it is a deep held belief that no matter what you achieve later on in life, there's this core, there's something bad and wrong about me. And to whatever degree that we have that, some of us more so than others, we all have it. And just try to give somebody like that a little constructive criticism or a little guidance or a little, that's really good. And you can do that a little better. It's just like pouring salt in a wound. Like they already have this deep belief there's something bad and wrong about me. So if you reflect anything back, they're just devastated. So this is the seed that grows the imposter syndrome. This is the seed that grows the self-sabotaging, right? Because I can't have an external environment that doesn't match my internal environment. So I'm going to mess it up. I'm going to sabotage it. Or if they only knew, I mean, yeah, I might be like fabulous, all kinds of everybody's, I got everybody fooled if they only really knew, right? So this is the wounds of the locus of control, which doesn't shift and doesn't advance.
You know, Julie, that reminds me, I asked a person who's very close to me one time why he cheats, right? Why he cheats on his wife. And he said, he only does it when things are really good at home, which was amazing because I had never, I didn't understand the man's brain, but what you just said confirms it, because if things are too good at home, they sabotage it. He would cheat to have that self-fulfilling prophecy that I'm no good. I'm not good enough to have a happy house with a happy wife and happy children.
It's self-punishment.
I will sabotage it because that's what I felt, what I feel inside.
Right, exactly. Yep. So that's just, I mean, there's so many examples of that. And by the way, I do these book studies where we go through every one of these concepts. And in the book, after each concept, there's a series of questions to ask yourself. So it's kind of a journaling book, but come in and do the book study. And we go through each one of these. And you get this deeper and deeper, profound understanding of yourself. So yeah, so that's the next concept is sort of similar. It's called magical thinking, which is connected to locus of control, right? I mentioned it earlier, Santa Claus and all of it, but it's a little bit different in this, in the concept use, in that magical thinking simply is, as an adult, well, as a child, everything was magical. Santa Claus and Easter and the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy. I mean, it's just a world filled with magic, but that's for children, right? Now we're adults and we still have what's called magical thinking. You have no idea how many people I've worked with that say these things. I wished it were different, yet do nothing to try and make things different. I believe one day things could change and I could be happy. So that's a belief, that's a wish, that's a belief, right? I hope that one day my partner would understand, but yet doing nothing to say, I want you to go to a class, or I want you to seek out therapy, or I want us to go, right? You've got to do something. But a lot of people sit around, hope, pray, wish, believe, and yet it's all magical unless you actually take some kind of language. So so the 5 concepts that I just talked about are all about your childhood, all the way right up through locus of control and magical thinking. Now you're going to take those and you're going to go out into the world with that base, that foundation. You know, stressors, survival stressors, alarms going on because I can't have the safe attachment, but I'm memorizing what to hold in memory around attachment because I'm alive. I make bad things happen. There's always a perpetrator. I'm always a victim. There should be a rescuer. And we're taking all that. We're going out into the world and trying to live a life by having that as our foundation. So what ends up happening is we go out into the world and we start getting triggered. That's why we talk about PTSD. The real thing around PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder, meaning that it happened in childhood. Traumatic is I can't utilize my fight or flight hormones that are surging through my body because I can't make this attachment, but I can't use them. That's the trauma. That creates the stress in the body. And now I'm going to go out into the world and I'm going to meet people and I'm going to get triggered. And so my reaction and my experience is completely out of order because I keep slipping back into that memory of my childhood. And I'm going to use childlike strategies to try and negotiate this real adult situations that are happening in my life. So I'm constantly being triggered. So I'm being touted as irrational, overdramatic, super sensitive. You know, I'm getting called all these things, and my behavior is certainly in keeping with those labels, but I can't seem to do anything about it. It's not me, it's what's going on that I can't hold my feet in the ground of now. I keep slipping into the past in the same way that a war veteran's walking down the street and hears a helicopter and a car backfire. He can't keep his feet in, 2022. He's back in the days of war and he's diving into the bushes. No thought involved. Why? Because it activates the senses, activates the survival part of the brain, the noise, right? Activates the survival part of the brain. Guess what happens? Thinking goes offline. If thinking holds all our formulas and our time and our intelligence, and that's offline, yeah, we're in an emotional surge and it's a fight or flight time and we're in the bushes. Same thing is happening in relationships with anything and anybody that even mildly represents an authority figure. That means we can't have a relationship because our partner is our secondary attachment. So we can't do that if our partner now becomes our parent, our teachers, our therapists, the police, the instructor, the doctor. We're being triggered all over the place and we can't keep our foot in the now. So trigger is, it's important to know what triggers you. And a lot of us will have different kinds of triggers. Some it'll be a facial expression. Some it'll be a tone of voice. You notice it's all the senses. So we have all these triggers and we have to learn how to manage our triggers. We can't ask people to not trigger us. That's not logical. We have to be able to understand what triggers us and what we can do about it. So, but we're not into those solutions yet. We're still into reactivating that wiring. So every time we get triggered, that neural pathway gets used and it's grooved and grooved and grooved. And the other thing that we do is the next concept, which is called loyalty to the perpetrator. Loyalty to the perpetrator has a byline underneath it, which is first at the hands of others and then at my own. Meaning that first my parents spoke horribly to me, and now I call myself an idiot. I'm so stupid. I'm never going to get it. What a numbskull, right? Or first at my parents' hands, I was neglected. And now I don't go to the doctor, won't go and get my teeth examined, right? So there's this loyalty issue. I once worked with a client who was severely, two things went on in his childhood. One, he had a very abusive father with corporal punishment, and he had an older brother who was sexually abusing him. So this client comes to see me, and guess what? He's got a sex addiction and he's got an eating disorder. First at the hands of others and now at my own. Now I am punishing myself, hurting myself, harming myself through my eating disorder. Plus I'm acting out. I decide what goes in and goes out, right? And I've got a sexual addiction. So now I'm abusing myself sexually. So this loyalty to the perpetrator, again, deep, deep, deep subconscious survival memory that we just keep running and running and running and running. And so loyalty to the perpetrator. The next one is reenactment. Again, this is how we keep that. This is how we're going to get that wiring and just keep it, grinding it in, hard wiring. This one is called reenactment. And the first one is, this is what I'm going to do to myself, first at their hands, now at my own. This is what I'm going to do to myself. The reenactment is, now I'm going to get other people to play the dynamics. For me, I'm going to marry the drug addict, right? I'm going to go and be a nurse. I'm going to go and recreate the very same dynamics that were present in my childhood. Why would I do that? Well, because it's coming from memory, from my survival part of the brain, and I know what I can survive. Everything else poses as a threat. So I'm going to go and get in the exact same kind of relationships. I'm going to go and give every part of myself to helping the wounded and the right. And so I'm recreating again and again and again and getting people to play those parts. Well, the bad news is that everybody's doing that. So if you're in a relationship, they've got you in reenacting their stuff too. So you hear a couple and there's you're just like my mother, you're just like my mother. If I wanted my mother, I would never have left home. You know, there's like, yeah, okay, so, but look what you've done. Look what you have recreated. The exact same type of person you have brought into your life, the exact same kind of stressors of trying to manage something that is unmanageable. And so you do that and I call it redo to undo. You sort of think, oh, this time the addict's going to choose me. And then that'll take away all the pain of when I wasn't chosen by my own mother, except it doesn't work. It's all kind of, you know, crazy magical thinking that's never going to get you anywhere. So after you do that enough times, you are in so much pain, failed relationships, you hate your job, you're stressed out to the max, meaning you have an onslaught of stress hormones and not so many feel-good hormones. We talk a lot about that later on in the solutions, in the helpful concepts. These are just sort of our hard wiring. So the problem is that we're having all these feelings and we don't know how to deal with our feelings. So the next concept is hiding our feelings, hiding from our feelings. Well, we were taught as children, don't you dare talk that way. So we can't have our anger. Stop that crying or I'll give you something to cry about. So now we can't have our pain and our sadness. Don't be a scaredy cat. So now we can't have our fear. And even our joy, it's like calm down, settle down, knock it off, shut up, you know, so we can't even, so we can't have our feelings. We can't demonstrate our feelings. That is getting shut down over and over and over again. Now we're in reenacting and failed relationships. We're abusive to ourselves. We're in triangulated situations. We've got PTSD up the you know what, and we don't understand our feelings. We don't know how to talk about them. We don't know how to share them. We're ashamed of having them. And so what we do is we find a way to get away from them. So now we're starting to get in trouble, right? Because I know how to get away from feelings. I'll just drink. I'll smoke some weed, or maybe do a line. Maybe I'll get in a big dramatic relationship, and then I'll be all up and involved in all that drama, so I can't feel the pain. Oh, I don't know who I am. I don't know how I'm living. I don't know what to do, right? I don't know who my authentic self is. So I got to do everything. You can work, you can exercise, you can intellectualize, you can use codependent. We write lists and lists and lists of what people can do to stay away from feeling. So it's, where do we go to hide our feelings? Well, now you're going to transition into, you're going to find a couple of ways that work better than any other. So if gambling isn't your thing, if intellectualizing isn't quite your thing, but aha, I found my thing, and it's opiates, let's say. Now that one really takes me to another, right? So I'm going to use that one again, and then I'm going to go to it again, and then I'm going to go to it again. And before you know it, it has developed into an obsessive compulsive disorder. Now I can't stop doing it. So that's the next concept, addictions. Addictions are often where we go to hide our feelings. That's the root. And so we are now, addictions defined by Wisdom and Recovery is a compulsion to continue to do something, even though you know it's going to hurt you and the people that care about you. You are compelled to do it anyways. So you have developed some hard wiring around where I go for some relief, where I go and what I do to distract myself from the pain of this existence. It's where I started. It just didn't give me what I needed. There was so much missing. I got what I didn't need, and I didn't get what I really needed. And the pain of that, I can't tolerate. I don't know what to do with it. I help. So, and I don't know what to do to get help. So I found a way out, and it has become my addiction. That was the first 10 concepts.
Julie, I have a question for you. Do you think that anybody comes out of childhood unscathed?
Well, I don't know about the unscathed part, but I do know that nobody comes out of a difficult childhood without holding memory about what how to proceed in the world because of it. So you can come out of childhood if you had, which is rare, because I say, people go like, well, isn't everybody a little bit, like, gosh, come on, man. So it's like, yeah, because we are a species that are meant to evolve. Mm-hmm. And it's better than it was, right? We're not clubbing people over the heads. We're not shooting and murdering our wives and selling our children. Although in some areas, yes, indeed, that is still going on. But we have evolved, but we have not evolved. We've only just barely evolved out of stop punishing your children and start teaching them. We've only just gotten out of where you get beat at home, and then you go to school and you make a mistake at school, they beat you too. Right? We're just now starting to realize that little children, that spanking children, scares them, humiliates them, and it sets off a whole neurological hormonal activation, high adrenals, high cortisol, all of these alarms are going off in this body. And you do that too much, and you got a kid now that's jacked up, because he's now got a baseline of high adrenals, and we call that anxiety disorder.
Hypervigilance.
Anxiety disorder. People use the word anxiety like it's a badge of honor. I mean, it's a very strange sort of way. So people say I have anxiety, and I say, so you have high levels of fear. They're like, no, I'm not afraid. And I'm like, okay, so let's understand fear. What is that exactly? When we get into the next 10 concepts, we're going to talk about what exactly is fear. What is pain? What is joy? What is sadness? What are these words that describe this neurological, hormonal, endocrine, circulatory, muscular, skeletal process that happens in our bodies that we feel, and therefore we call them feelings. So we'll talk about that when we get into sort of it's also kind of educational, but when we start getting into the solutions, it's about really that deep and profound understanding of like, holy schmoly, that's what's actually going on. Which then, of course, all ties into that first concept, understand your brain and body.
Which is quite beautiful, really, to really realize there's so many systems going on within the body to keep us alive, whether it's the endorphins or the norepinephrine or the adrenaline or all the systems that are going on that create the E motion, that create the E, the energy happening within your body.
Right.
That it all was for a reason, there was a reason for it. I mean, and survival. And I think it's quite beautiful, but then it got kind of out of hand, and then the addictions to cover up the emotion, to cover up the feelings. You talked about, I heard you talking about on a podcast before about we get the words feel and think really messed up. People will be saying, I feel like I should leave now. Whereas you talked about it really well about we get the terminology mixed up, and we're not even using the right terminology for feeling as we should be for thinking, and vice versa. Can you talk a little bit about that
so that is a concept in the set of tools, the new wiring. I call it the new wiring. So you don't even have to come up with the new wiring. You just need to have the wiring to replace this old wiring. And that particular concept is called, is it a thought or is it a feeling? And that is where we learn to speak properly, so that if I'm feeling, it better be one of these four. It needs to be followed by sadness, anger, fear, or happy. If I'm going to say I'm feeling and I can't say one of these four, then it's a thought. Mm-hmm. And so what keeps us from speaking what we think? There's a reason. That's another lesson we have learned. So when I talk to people who talk in this way, which is just about everybody, and don't get me started on that, because I'm just not going to go down that rabbit hole, although I'm passionate about it and I just want to so bad, but I'm not going to. So a lot of people talk that way. And one of the main questions I ask them is, when you were a child, what you thought, could you articulate? Did it matter? So we have been taught that what we think and our opinion doesn't matter. So we frame everything into this gobbledygook way of talking, where everything is a feeling, because after all, you can't argue with somebody's feelings, except that isn't a feeling. I think I feel that's unfair is not a feeling. That is a thought. I think that's unfair. Just like you said, I feel it's time to go. That's a thought. You think it's time to go. Now that thought is probably going to activate a feeling like, oh, I think it's time to go. Oh, now I've got a feeling of fear. Why? Because a little bit of adrenaline, because I got to go, or I'm going to be late. So my thinking, that's a whole nother concept, thinking, feeling, behavior, And so we're going to learn all about that when we get into the next 10 concepts. So we have covered the childhood wiring and how we went out in the world and took that wiring and grooved it in nice and hard. And now we're going to learn how to we can't undo it. All we can do is create different wiring, use it again and again and again. And you know the saying, use it or lose it. If you stop using this childlike old wiring and keep redirecting to these concepts, then you end up losing it, meaning it just doesn't ignite. The new concepts, the new circuitry panel, so to speak, is what is igniting, which we, neurons that fire together, wire together. So you keep doing it and doing it and doing it, and it becomes the working memory. And this old memory begins to be just something you used to do, the way it used to be. And there's some real excitement and joy in using this new sophisticated wiring, which is much more in keeping with the authentic self. You think about yourself as a 2 and a 3-year-old, and you are just like overjoyed and excited, and everything is beautiful and bright and shiny, and you're fully yourself, and you're confident, and that's very much in keeping with what you experience when you have this new circuitry panel lit up and active in your life. Now, it's not like you don't have problems. Sure, you've got grown-up problems because you're grown up, but the deal is that it's not what happens, it's how you move through what happens. Yeah, you're going to have your feelings. You're going to have some sadness, of course, because your body is working as it should. But it's about being able to process those feelings and know that there's many things happening at the same time. There are things that are happening that are challenging or that might be painful. But there's also a whole bunch of other things happening. And that's the concept of integration, which we'll talk more about the next time we get together and get into those other parts of the work, so to speak.
Well, Julie, it's been amazing. Like, I just love listening to you because everything you say is just so touches me, right? It just touches me. And if I had known this, when I was a teenager even, or a young adult or a young mother or whatever, if I had just known this stuff, I mean, I probably would have made a lot of mistakes as well, but I would have made a
Maybe
not
not the same kinds of mistakes, though. I'm telling
yeah,
you.
exactly.
Whenever we have we do these support groups to keep this wiring firing, right? So we do these support groups, and whenever we have somebody come into the program that's in their early 20s, we're just like, oh my gosh, we just love them so much. We're just like, yeah, come on, and so we get our, vicariously, we see their beginning to lay down memory and beginning to live and understand things on such sophisticated ways that I know if I could just do it all over again and be that 23-year-old, but
and Julie, I have 2 daughters, and one is not interested at all in learning at this, and the other is so interested. And so when I was telling her yesterday that I was interviewing you, and I told her how you believed that the drinking or the alcohol, the drinking, drugs, whatever, is not the problem. And you had said that, the drinking is not the problem, the drugs are not the problem, the infidelity is not the problem, it's the solution to the problem. And she was like, Mom, ask her if it's the coping mechanism.
clever girl. Matter of fact, that's the very next concept. That's a concept that I say where you hit the wall, which is all of a sudden you realize that all of these problems, now, just to be clear, the drinking and the drugs are going to create a whole cluster of problems in and of themselves, which then unfortunately are a distraction from the real deep core problem, right? But you got to deal with that. You got to go to the treatment. If you got to go to the treatment, you got to go to the 12 step, you got to go to the 12 step. You have to deal with the problem that has been created, but it isn't the core issue. It isn't the core problem. It started out as the solution to the core problem. So when you realize that, and you're like, wait a minute, that's not the real problem. I mean, it's making problems for sure, but it's not the real problem. And then you get in touch with, well, what is the real problem? And you realize, I don't know who I am and I don't know how to live is the real problem. That's when you're ready to take on the next 10 concepts and create that new wiring, because that is the way out. So, yeah. So
I'm sitting here through the whole interview with you and listening to you, and I'm just big smile on my face. Because it's like you are describing my life. You know, that the PTSD, the, oh my gosh, the physical feeling when you get triggered, the, you know, all the thoughts, all the things that just comes up. So yes, I'm so grateful to be here, to be on the other side of that, and to recognize everything that you say and everything that you tell us. And I cannot wait to hear more about the rest of it, because I know the conclusion and the solution to everything, to giving you new life and hope and everything that goes with that is just amazing. So Julie, thank you so much for this first part of your interview with us. I cannot wait for next time when we are discussing the last 10 steps and in getting to the answer, the solution, and the life where you just soar above it all.
That's right. Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it too. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for,
you know, it's fun.
being
Went
here.
by just like that. Of course, me, I can just go on and on and on. But I really enjoyed myself. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Perfect.
And how can
sorry,
you get, how can our viewers get a hold of you? How can they learn more about you? How can they find your book? How can they find your programs?
Okay, so you can find my program by going to Wisdom and Recovery, wisdomandrecovery.com. That'll take you to my website, and that will, you know, give you a whole panel of different things to explore, from counseling to webinars to workshops. And then also there's a link there, shopping, and that'll take you to my book. And then you can just click on it. It's just going to take you over to Amazon, and then you'll be able to purchase the book. I do the book studies again, which is just myself working with people and going through these concepts and getting to know them personally and how to apply them to your own personal life. So that's a real transformational experience. So I do those. It's an 8-week series. We go through all of them. And so yes, do not hesitate if this sounds like it resonates with you. And I want to say that even those attachment conflicts, they can be very, very subtle. People are surprised, like when they hear the word trauma. That's why I try not to use it too much, because they hear the word trauma. It's like, oh, that's not me, which would have included me, Julie Valenti. I would have said, no, I didn't have childhood trauma. Although I was raised by a mother who was using prescription diet pills, and I couldn't get that secure attachment. It can be very, very subtle, but that attachment has to be in place. It has to be reliable, consistent, predictable, day in, day out. And you have to be touched. You have to have the experience of being loved. It's not enough to have a roof over your head and food on your table. It's not enough for adults to say, I know my parents loved me, but I didn't have the experience of really being loved. So it can be very, very subtle, but it makes a lasting change in the way you're going to be able to have relationships, not just with other people, but the relationship you have to yourself.
The most important one.
So yes, please, anybody and everybody that this resonates with, you reach out. There's a place on the website that you can interact. You can send me a message, and I personally will answer your messages. So ask me any questions. I'm available.
And Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you're on all of those as well, is correct?
That's correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah, not Twitter, but Facebook and Instagram. For sure. Right. Yeah.
Wonderful. Now, thank you again so much, Julie, and thank you, Fran, and we will see you all next time.
Okay.
And If you liked it, subscribe.
There you go. Bye.
Bye.